Spoilers ahead. Watch out, and enjoy the recap. The film opens in Colombia with a heavily guarded meeting between a drug lord named Don Luis and his longtime employee, Fabio. Luis has come to understand that Fabio is resigning from his post. When Fabio handed him the disc that contains the database of their drug smuggling business, Luis grinned and wished him luck. As soon as Fabio departs Luis's mansion, Don Luis orders Marco, his new right-hand man, to kill Fabio and his entire family. Fabio understands from past experience that Don Luis will hunt him down because nobody ever leaves his drug trafficking organization. Following that, he speeds to his apartment in a hurry. Knowing that they only had an hour to depart Colombia, Fabio ordered his wife and daughter, Catalea, to pack their bags. Instantaneously, Marco and his men surround Fabio's residence. They started by opening fire on the security guards and killed them all in one round. Upon hearing gunshot sounds, Fabio orders Catalea to stay inside the house in case she survives. She needs to deliver the microchip to the American embassy. It contains details about Don Luis's illegal activities, and will serve as her passport to America. He goes on to provide her with the American address for his brother, along with an Acatalia-adorned orchid necklace. Fabio and his wife grabbed their guns to repel the goons. Catalea sat dumbfounded at the table and heard the gunshots as her parents were murdered. Out of fear, she tucks the microchip under the table. Meanwhile later, Marco and his crew walk into the house. Marco tries to befriend her and claims that he was a friend of her father, so he asks her to give him the microchip. In response, Catalea picks up the knife and stabs him in the hand. Then she dashes, leaps through the window and lands on the ledge. After swallowing the microchip, Catalea jumps from the second-floor apartment and takes off running. Apparently, Marco's thugs use four-wheel vehicles and motorcycles to pursue her. However, Catalea is accustomed to the area, so it's effortless for her to elude them and get away through the sewer. She opens the manhole in the middle of the street and walks straight to the embassy. The security guard leads her to the embassy's security chief. Without being asked, Catalea forces herself to throw up on the table, and then she gives him the microchip. The chief inspects the card and discovers that it contains information on the most wanted drug trafficker, Don Luis, and his drug smuggling endeavors. The chief learns from Catalea that she has nowhere to go. Because of this, a CIA operative is assigned to take her and escort her to the United States. In America, the Department of Social Services welcomes Catalea with some cash, but she escapes through the bathroom window since she is unwilling to be taken to foster care facilities. In search of her uncle, Catalea uses the address her father gave her to buy a bus ticket to Chicago. After a long day, Catalea finally meets her uncle, Emilio, who completely engulfs her. In Emilio's arms, Catalea feels more secure because she sobs for the first time since her parents were murdered. That morning, Catalea came to know that the previous owner of the bed she slept in was her cousin, Emilio's son, who got killed by the drug cartels. Emilio assures her that no one will bother her since he avenged them all. The following day, Emilio offers the prep principal a bribe in exchange for enrolling Catalea in the school in the middle of the academic year. Angrily, Catalea claims to Emilio that she's unfit for the school because she wants to be an assassin. In response, Emilio opens fire on the moving car, killing everyone inside. She hears him say it's a fairly simple process to pull the rope and kill people. However, he warns her that an assassin without intelligence can be put to death quickly. Emilio urges her to enroll in school so she can learn how the world operates. 15 years later, in California, two cops are eating lunch in their car when they get smashed into by a fast-moving vehicle, only to find out it has been driven by a woman who is clearly intoxicated and shouting gibberish. According to the necklace, it is an old Catalea. She was then promptly arrested and detained. Catalea is accused of damaging government property and using the wrong side of the road. She's been dragged to her cell. The drug cartel prisoner is delivered at that precise moment by a U.S. Marshal under tight security. Marshal advises his junior to drink coffee because he's not allowed to sleep. Catalea transformed into an assassin, and she is after this prisoner. She awakens, dons a tight costume, and uses the hairpin to unlock her cell door. Catalea rotates the camera so nobody can see her. She grabs a glass of water and walks into a high-voltage space, where she rigs the spoon and glass of water to spark the electricity. She dives into the air duct and passes through the stalled fan before power is restored. Catalea leaps into the bathrooms. When the officer watching the prisoner notices that he has no coffee, he decides to use the lavatory, where Catalea kicks him to the ground and takes his firearm. The prisoner is awakened by her entry into his cell. Catalea demands that he take off his shirt before sternly shooting him repeatedly. After hearing the shots, Marshall runs to the corridor, only to discover that his colleague is holding the murder weapon. Catalea framed him for killing a prisoner, so he was taken into custody. But this isn't enough to stop the marshal from activating the siren alarm and sealing off the perimeters. To elude them, Catalea ascends to the rooftop, then swiftly leaps from the building and dives back to the ventilator system to get into her cell before the camera catches anything. Marshall orders a search of every single cell, only to find out that Catalea is pretending to be sleeping in her cell. She was fingerprinted the next morning and then released. Catalea had been wearing latex skin that reflected someone else's fingerprints, but the police chief was unaware of this. To launch the investigations, FBI Special Agent Ross linked up with other agents in California in order to solve the 4-year-old case of never-ending dead bodies on the streets. When Ross arrives at the mortuary, he finds out that the murderer who left the flower picture on the chests of all 22 recent victims was the same person. Ross inquires about investigating the crime scene. Ross orders Marshall to bring a list of everyone who has been inside the facility in the previous 24 hours, including the security camera tapes. Ross is concerned that the case might not be solvable, so he had the notion to alert the press about the case and issue a cautionary note to the public. Nevertheless, CIA agent Richard goes to the tightly secured villa in New Orleans. It's for Don Luis, who is currently under the government's witness protection program. Richard is resentful and holds Luis responsible for withholding information regarding the drug cartels and the serial killer. If he doesn't control the problem, Richard says he will sue him. As soon as Richard departs, Don Luis already knows that Fabio's daughter, Catalea, so he gives Marco the go-ahead to find her as quickly as possible and kill her. After a long day, Catalea returns home to relax with some lonely classical music, and take a long shower while thinking about her boyfriend. Catalea installs the security cameras all over her flat before she leaves for her boyfriend. Danny, Catalea's boyfriend, is an artist. He only recognizes her as Jennifer and doesn't know anything about her. That night, they shared the same bed. Catalea goes very early before Danny wakes up because she is too terrified to tell him who she really is. However, Special Agent Ross convenes his task force, and he is convinced that the murderer of the previous victims was in that prison. So he then gives them additional folders, including the addresses and mobile phone numbers of each inmate who was in the prison. That same day, Catalea meets Emilio, who tells her about the next victim, a hedge fund manager. He stole billions of dollars from the investors and fled to Mexico. So several people want him killed. But he warns her against acting foolishly by leaving flowers because they can be tracked back. Something that will endanger his family. Catalea promises Emilio that she will quit the assassination work after she has exacted her retribution on Don Luis. Ross is fixated on the flower. Luckily he's informed by the mailman that the flower is Acatalia, which only grows in Colombia. Ross makes it his mission to do research on it, but his efforts are fruitless because it falls under CIA jurisdiction. During the sunset, Catalea goes to Emilio's garage to feed her dog steaks, but they only do so at her command. After saying hello to Pepe, she retrieves her passport from Waldrop and travels to Mexico in search of her next victim. The hedge manager surrounds himself with gorgeous women in his villa. Out of curiosity, he keeps sharks in his aquarium. Before he heads to sleep, he asks for more security to be stationed in all corridors to ensure his happiness, as planned. Despite this, Catalea swims in the aquarium, but she is ignored by the sharks, so she pushes the glass cover and walks into the villa unnoticed. The manager notices the marks on his chest when he wakes up. But he gets more terrified when he realizes that all security personnel have been killed. As soon as he picks up the gun, he spots a Catalea flower on the swimming pool cover. The manager's attempt to shoot failed when Catalea made her presence known. She fired the leg caps first prior to the headshot. Then his sharks grasped him and tore him to the last bone. Back in America, Special Agent Ross phones CIA Agent Richard to get authorization so he can dig more deeply in the Catalea flower, but he ignores him as usual. As soon as he hangs up, Richard calls Don Luis to finish the job quickly because the FBI has begun connecting some of the dots. Luis dispatches Marco to interrogate every Colombian family in Chicago. Until he can get to Catalea's family and kill her. Upon reviewing the camera tape, one agent believes the assailant is a woman, considering she is the only one to have left the building since then. But Special Agent Ross is not convinced yet. Catalea is bored and feels lonely, so she goes to her boyfriend's apartment to spend another night. But Danny pulls back from kissing her in order to get to know her better. After some difficulty, Danny finds out that Catalea is from Colombia. Since Danny is so determined to marry Catalea, he takes pictures of her when she is sleeping. The moment Catalea woke up and saw it was noon, she freaked out and began to regret her time at Danny's residence. Danny grows perplexed and asks questions. After that, Catalea finds Emilio and informs him that his friend was among the 8 Colombians who were shot dead in a pub the previous night. The frightened Emilio claims she should quit or never return to his house, because he doesn't want her to be too close to his family. Danny, Cataleya's boyfriend, meets the private eye to find out more about his girlfriend's past. The investigator called his sister-in-law, who works at the police station, and sent her Cataleya's picture. He requests that she investigate her credibility. The instant Cataleya's picture entered the system, FBI agent Ross's computer popped up. Then he tracks the signal all the way up to a local police station. Ross matches Cataleya's snapshot and the security film. Cataleya is unquestionably the assassin Ross is hunting for. Agent Ross intercepts a phone call between Cataleya and Danny as they discuss their relationship. But not until Danny mentions the photo he took when she was sleeping. Cataleya gets surprised, freaks out, and starts to panic while checking the surveillance cameras, only to find out that the FBI has encircled the entire area. In order to avoid being seen, Cataleya retrieves her rifle from the bathroom and shoots the cameras. She then opens the tube and escapes through the ventilation system. When Agent Ross breaks into her apartment, he discovers that Cataleya had cameras throughout and watched each and every one of their moves. Cataleya hastily returns home that evening to inform Emilio and Grandma that conditions have worsened and they should leave the city. However, she regrettably discovers that Grandma, Pepe, and Emilio have all been brutally murdered by Don Luis's goons. This makes Cataleya more angry. She then walks into Agent Ross's residence as a result. He points the gun at him and motions for him to sit. Ross hears Cataleya say that she has already turned off the sensors, so he shouldn't expect anyone to save him. Ross learns the rationale for Cataleya's dozen-person murder spree. In Colombia, Don Luis, who is a witness protected by the US government, gave Marco the order to execute her family. Ross reasons with Cataleya that since Don Luis is under the CIA's supervision, he is unable to assist her. She offers him the choice of removing Don Luis from his cover or preparing to attend his children's weekly funerals. In order to save his family, the terrified agent, Ross, meets arrogant CIA agent Richard under Cataleya's orders over the phone. She demands Don Luis's address. Richard first refused because he doesn't buckle under pressure, but when Cataleya fired warning shots and passed through his office, Richard revealed Don Luis's location to them. Cataleya collects several firearms from the store and drives the armored truck to Don Luis's location, her bulldogs in tow. At Don Luis's heavily guarded villa, Marco is instructing the hired mercenaries on how to combat Cataleya. The villa is struck by the rocket, and Don Luis barely makes it out. Marco concealed him in the crevice. When some of the mercenaries are trying to escape using vehicles, Cataleya runs them over with her truck. She then mercilessly pours gunfire over their car, and everyone is killed. Marcos watches his men drop before his eyes, and he comes to the realization that Cataleya is the worst enemy he has ever experienced. Cataleya rains bullets on everyone in her line of sight. She engages in a physical duel with Marco, but he's more proficient than her. Lucky enough, Cataleya seizes the toothbrush and stabs him in the neck to put an end to the fight. After a brief period of silence, Don Luis emerges from his cover and makes an attempt to escape using a box-body vehicle. Luis's plan of escape looks promising until the county garbage removal vehicles block his path. Cataleya calls Don Luis when the phone is on a loudspeaker. Luis boasts about her failure to exact retribution against him. Unknowingly, Cataleya owns the truck, so she orders the canines to chow down. They added him to their roster for the night. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to watch more of my videos. Have a good day.